prefer pen and paper, keyboard? Do you dictate? What is your preferred method?
I don't dictate because I'm extremely self-conscious, and hearing the sound of my own voice would make me hide under the bed, and I would never get any writing done. Um, no, I used to just write on the computer, and the temptation to edit while I'm doing that is one of the reasons Keys took 5 years, because I was editing that book as I went along, and then you make a change, and you have to go back and do it all over again. And so there's some value in that because you get to know your characters really well, and you get to think about what you're doing for a really long time before you actually commit. But mostly I do my drafts with pen and paper now, which I never used to do at all, because that way I can't really go back and edit. It's too much trouble. It's really, I'm writing, and it's a lot of work getting that pen and paper down on the page, so I'm not going to bother to go back and make corrections. I'll just make notes if there's something that I want to change, which there always is, and so I haven't. And then quite often I don't use that draft literally, but I use it as a guide when I go back to write the actual scene. So then I go to the computer. Plus, if you go back and forth, you can kind of I'm sick of writing with this pen and paper. I'll go work on the computer for a while, and so you get a little bit of sense of accomplishment that way, that you can jump from one thing to another.
Yeah. Do you use a writing program, or do you just use a normal word processor?
I just use Word. Having a pretty strong technical background, I have a low opinion of technical. Anytime you commit to something like a writing package, you have locked yourself into their technical support world. And so I feel like doing something really generic is best for me. Other people swear by other things. Plus, I'm really comfortable. If I want a bunch of pictures, I don't need to load them in a program. I can just put them in a file on my computer and look at them. I'm perfectly happy with that. So,
is there a strong writing community in Tucson, Arizona?
There is a pretty strong writing community. Though the part that I'm mostly hooked into is the Romance Writers of America Tucson chapter. It's called Saguaro Romance Writers, which is the name of those big cactuses.
Oh, yes.
The arms like this, the saguaros. And so they have been just great. There's about 50 of us, and I've been in it for about 10 years now. It's interesting, the way I got into the romance community was a long time ago. There was a radio show, an interview on a radio show that I was listening to on the National Public Radio, and they covered one of these national conventions, and they went around and talked to all the people at the conventions, which were mostly women. It's about 90% women in romance writing, and they just all sounded so nice. It's like they were talking to one person and the next person, like, well, what are you doing here? It's like, oh, we just come, we're having fun, and we're learning so much, and it's great. And I said, yeah, and do you really have romance lives like you're writing about? And they just all burst out laughing. Yes, that's exactly what our lives are like.
Yes, absolutely.
And so before I even joined, I went to the next convention, which was in Reno, Nevada, and it was a wonderfully friendly community. A lot of writing groups are supportive, but there's just something, maybe because it's dominated by women, as opposed to some of the other writing groups, where that people are just hugely supportive and friendly and great. So that has been a really good writing community. But there's a bunch of other things too. There's a pretty strong science fiction community here in town, and I've been to their conventions. There's 2 mystery writing groups. I think it's a place where, I don't know, maybe people come because they tend to move here a little later in their careers when they've got a little bit more free time for writing, possibly. But yeah, it's
independent publishers, or did you publish the book yourself, or?
I did. So I did some querying. I spent about a year looking for an agent or an editor, but it's a really time-consuming process, and I'm kind of pig-headed, and I kind of like, well, there's this indie option, and I may not become a huge, big, successful writer, but as far as I can tell, most people following the traditional publishing path don't either. Plus, they spend all this time, trying to get people to notice they exist. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're still trying to get people to notice you exist. You go on various promotional things, um, but it's a very entrepreneurial way to look at things instead of, instead of feeling like you have to keep chasing after somebody else's definition of success.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been really happy with my decision to be indie.
Oh,
And the
that's
only thing
great.
that would change my mind would be if somebody came and offered me a lot of money. That would be okay. I would drop it just like that. Like, indie? Huh? What's that?
Mm.